Please be seated. At some point along the way, either in school or just through popular culture, we have learned Newton's third law of motion, which maintains that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Some physics teacher probably introduced this concept to you with a device called Newton's cradle, a contraption with a series of 5 suspended metal balls. When you pull one back on one side and let it go, it swings and hits the stack and moves a ball on the other side. If you pick up 2 balls, same thing, 2 go on the other side. All actions have equal and opposite reactions. In a controlled lab setting, this reaction is easy to track, but it's not so easy to appreciate in everyday life. Out in the wild, our actions are dissipated through a wide field of influence, and it can be difficult to trace the effects back to their original causes. Instead of energy being transferred back and forth in a linear pattern, we've got balls flying from every direction at irregular intervals all of the time. It can seem like utter chaos. All the forces in the world dispersed through the nexus of media, the people around us, and our own felt expectations, has an equal and opposite reaction within our emotional worlds. Our emotions are frequently ping-ponging around, reacting to the various forces that are applied to us. Sometimes when someone smiles at us, we smile back. Conversely, when someone growls at us, well, you know what happens. Well, the world may be too complex of a place to track all the chains of reactions. The internal world, the workings of our hearts and minds, is maybe not too difficult to follow if you can pause and notice. Practice some mindful breathing, just paying attention. If you do take a moment to check in with yourself before reacting, you might just notice the action and be able to redirect the energy in a constructive way. If you invite yourself to pay attention to your feelings as you walk through the world, you may be surprised by what you discover. I was reminded of this, to do this past Wednesday morning. It's my job to get the boys motivated and out of the house on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And there's always a mad dash to get to the car promptly so we can get to school on time so someone doesn't get a detention. Driving the constrained and narrow streets surrounding Jamestown High School at 8 a.m. is always a challenge. If you've been out there, you know it. Cars and people are coming from every direction as parents drop their kids off before heading off to work. Waves of stress emanate through a whole 3-block radius from the high school. And of a certain lethargy of children having to get back to school too. So as we pulled into a parking spot on 3rd Street, behind and in front of other cars engaged in the same drop-off procedure, Aiden and Kieran opened their car doors and walked out to cross the street. I watched as one agitated mom slammed on her horn and exaggeratedly threw her shoulders up and went like, "What are you doing?" to my son, to castigate him, who had assumed the right of way. Observing this reaction, I felt a certain call to action myself. While my child had not been right, now he was clearly wronged. And it felt like one of those Newtonian balls had swung right into me, and I was forced to react and slam my own hand on the horn and let this lady know what I was feeling. But somehow, I was able to breathe instead. And as I pulled out behind her and followed her for the next 5 minutes, I had many opportunities to let the baser part of myself come out. But instead, somehow, God intervened, and I heard a call from God, from the divine itself. So I took a breath and just paid attention to myself instead, the inner landscape of all that I was feeling, and paid attention. Often in life, we hear a call, the voice of a call, if we pay attention. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Yes, you. You is a simple word. It's a ubiquitous word. We use it all the time. And simply defined, it means the one or ones being addressed. But you is a word that startles, filling us with equal parts dread and delight. When we hear it, something in us leaps. Me? Am I the one being picked? First this time, not last? We hear you, and we immediately think, me. Yes, you is the response. You can be tender, accusatory, or curious. Often we hear it in consort with insults like, you moron, or you idiot. This is usually the case when the other you is driving a car, as I already illustrated. Sometimes you is invoked in a curse, when we silently think, damn you, to the individual who neglected to change the toilet paper roll or put the milk container empty back in the fridge. You can be singular or plural or unknown. People leave messages on the answering machines of people they know are dead, so they can have an opportunity to say you again. And of course, the you is almost always related to the I. You is the very beginning of conversation with me. Like the chicken or the egg, it's impossible to know who comes first, you or me. You can be present even in its absence, too. Don't forget to shut the door, for instance, is addressed to a you that's not named or even addressed in the statement, only implied. Anything from affection to aggression can be quieted the you in any sentence. Even when we're alone, we're in conversation with some you. Someone is always speaking. We're always in conversation. Maybe it's God, or maybe it's some quiet other that lives inside of us. So today, on the fourth Sunday of Advent, we're all responding to the call we've heard. You. Yes, you. Of course, this is the story we witness in today's enigmatic gospel reading. It's a story of greeting. The action begins before our story, as one of Newton's balls has collided with Mary, and now she's fleeing with haste, the text tells us, from the confusing and complicated situation that she has found herself embroiled in. It all started when a messenger from beyond arrived saying, you! Yes, you. Hail, favored one, fear not. She's presented with some startling news, God's daring plan, which requires human collaboration. And she assents. And as that yes grows and she begins to show, she realizes that she must go and seek guidance from her kinswoman, Elizabeth. As she gets close, she calls out a greeting to the you that she hopes to find refuge with. And her voice is met with an in utero response. Elizabeth feels the action and does not react, but responds with a poetic benediction. And then Mary breaks into song. I think this simple interaction between the two yous in the story is quite telling. The force of the action in this story is transmuted, transfigured. Instead of a mere reaction, we get a bona fide response. Indeed, that is what the season of Advent is all about. Response, not reaction. I think we all know the different emotional state between being reactive, reactionary, and responsive. They're different. And Advent is about being responsive. You may have noticed that instead of reciting the psalm, after the Hebrew texts throughout Advent, we've been singing, kind of confusingly so, standing twice, what's going on? This isn't the normal rhythm of things. During Advent, we sing canticles. Each of the ones the last 2 weeks come pulled from Luke's gospel. I think it's important to notice that St. Luke's recounting of the Nativity is shrouded with music and in song. By transcending the rubrics of prose narrative, poetry such as Mary's Magnificat pierces the veil of the ordinary and opens a window by which to perceive afresh the extraordinary and unexpected goodness of God, goodness of life. In doing so, Mary, through her song, promises that the Holy One of Israel may also encounter us amid the ordinary, mundane, and even the difficult activities of our daily lives. Even as people are honking at us and our children, God continues to call out to you. Yes, you. Luke's infancy narratives are suffused with singing. After Mary, Zechariah will take the stage to praise God's fidelity to Israel through the birth of John the Baptist. The angels will soon offer their canticle of peace and goodwill at the birth of Jesus. And Simeon will croon of God's mercy being extended to all the world. Why so much verse, so much song? Because St. Luke understands, as did the psalmists of Israel, that songs are powerful. Just think about the way that songs have been the thing that has moved the people. Think back to the Civil Rights era. Bob Dylan and all those other folks who sang songs of protest. Think back to the anti-apartheid movement. It was music that moved the people. Laments express our grief and fear so as to honor these deep and difficult emotions, and yet also simultaneously strip them of their power to incapacitate us. We sing when we're afraid. Songs of praise and thanksgiving unite us with the one to whom we lift our voices, giving us strength in numbers. And canticles of courage promise not only name our hopes, but also contribute to bringing them into very being. Songs are power. This one especially. Notice that the verbs in Mary's song are all in the past tense. Mary recognizes that she's been drawn into relationship with the God of Israel, the God of the universe, the one who's been siding with the oppressed and downtrodden since the time of Egypt, the one who's been making and keeping promises since the days of Abraham. The past tense in this case, we should be clear, does not signify that all Mary sings of has already been accomplished, but rather describes God's characteristic activity and acknowledges that Mary is now included in God's history of redemption, that we are also included in God's saving work here and now. Mary's song shows how the energy of God's intervention in the world need not be opposed, but welcomed. She shows us, too, that we don't need to react, but we have the power to respond to God's call. Yes, God continues to call to you. Yes, you. And you, and you, and you, and you. When someone honks their horn or calls you a name, you can harness God's power to redirect that negative energy for good. You are not a Newtonian ball that must swing back in the opposite direction with equal force. Mary's song is a reminder that we can turn, that we can say yes to God's intervention, that we can be an extension of God's saving redemption here and now. Today the choir will sing a modern rendition of the Magnificat called the Canticle of the Turning, which is set to the pulsing Irish tune of Star of the Counting Down. So grateful for James and Elizabeth, who are going to play fiddle to kind of get us into the spirit as well. And the refrain is all about how our response might just shift the balance of the state of things. Here's what it says. My heart shall sing of the day you bring, that the fires of your justice burn. Wipe away all tears, for the dawn draws near, and the world is about to turn. Just like long ago, when God called you, and Mary turned around to accept that call, so God is still calling today. You, yes, you. God is calling. Today, will you turn? Your turning might just be what precipitates the world's turning, so that justice and healing may be felt by all, especially the downpressed and the downtrodden. Yes, you. Amen.